The silence that spoke louder than words. The night was quiet in the city. Lights glowed on the streets, and a soft wind carried the sound of cars passing far away. Sandra Bullock sat in the corner of a small cafe, her eyes fixed on the window. She was not drinking her coffee anymore. It had gone cold, but she held the cup because it gave her hands something to do. People around her were laughing. Some were busy on their phones, some were talking loudly, but she was not part of them. Her silence was heavy, almost like a weight, pressing down on her chest. No one seemed to notice, except one man. Keanu Reeves walked in, quiet, as always, dressed simple, with nothing loud about him. He saw her at once. She did not look back, yet he knew something was not right. It was the kind of knowing that did not need words. He took a seat across from her without asking. No smile, no joke, no question, just his presence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Inside her heart, Sandra wanted to say many things. She wanted to tell him about the pressure, the noise of fame, the loneliness behind smiles, the exhaustion of always being strong in front of everyone. But she said nothing. Her lips did not move. Still, Keanu understood. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and simply nodded, slow and steady. That small gesture told her, I see you. I hear the silence. I know what it means. The clock on the wall ticked, and the cafe carried on. But for them, time slowed. Sandra finally lifted her eyes. There was a storm in them, but there was also something fragile. She whispered, almost like she was afraid of her own voice. Sometimes I feel invisible, even when everyone is looking. Keanu's face softened. He did not rush to answer. He allowed her words to sit in the air, as if giving them respect. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and calm. Being seen does not always come from eyes. Sometimes it comes from hearts. I see you. Her hands trembled a little as she placed the cup back on the table. She looked at him, in the silence. Between them grew deep again, but this time it was not empty. It was full of comfort, of safety, of truth. Then something unexpected happened. The cafe door swung open, and a man walked in with a camera. He spotted them immediately, his eyes wide, ready to capture a moment and sell it to the world. Sandra froze. She hated this part of life, the lack of space, the feeling of being hunted. Before the man could lift his camera, Keanu stood. His body shifted in front of her, blocking her from view. He did not speak harshly, did not shout, but his presence alone made the man lower his camera. Not tonight, Keanu said softly. His voice was steady, yet it carried a power that no one could ignore. The man hesitated, then turned and left. Sandra's eyes filled with tears, not because of fear anymore, but because of the simple act of kindness. No words, no drama, just respect, she whispered. Thank you. Keanu sat back down. You don't need to thank me, he replied. Sometimes silence is enough. I understood everything, and in that moment, for the first time in weeks, Sandra's heart felt lighter. When silence turned into trust night, after the cafe felt different for Sandra, she went home and lay in bed, the city lights slipping through her window. She kept hearing Keanu's words again and again, I see you. Those words had reached her heart in a way nothing else had for a long time. But peace never stayed long in her world. The very next morning, her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, calls, notifications. Someone had seen them together. Photos had already spread online, even though Keanu had blocked one man from snapping them. Another had caught a glimpse from the street. People were talking. Some said it was friendship. Others whispered it was something more. Sandra stared at the screen with heavy eyes. She hated this part, the gossip, the false stories, the way silence could be twisted into noise. Hours later, she got a call. Her manager's voice was sharp. You need to say something. The press wants a statement. But Sandra did not want to explain what had no explanation. How could she tell them that silence itself had been the whole point? Later that evening, She walked into the old theater where she and Keanu had agreed to meet. It was empty, except for rows of silent chairs and one man waiting on stage. He was sitting on the edge, legs stretched, hands resting on his knees, looking as calm as if nothing in the world could disturb him. When she entered, he lifted his head and gave a small smile. "It started already," she said, her voice carrying both anger and exhaustion. "They're writing stories." Keanu did not look surprised. "They always will. Don't you care?" she asked. "I care about the truth," he answered softly. "And the truth is not for them. It's for us." His calmness unsettled her, yet it also grounded her. She sat beside him, letting her shoulders rest for the first time all day. For a moment, there was only the sound of the old building creaking. Then Keanu turned to her. "Tell me what you are afraid of, Sandra. Not the headlines, not the cameras. You." She took a deep breath. The words tasted bitter in her mouth. "I'm afraid of trusting. Every time I let people close, they take pieces of me away. I don't want to lose more of myself." Keanu was silent for a while, as if respecting her fear. Finally, he spoke. "Then trust doesn't have to mean giving pieces away. It can mean building something together, not losing, gaining." Sandra felt tears pressing behind her eyes, but she held them back. She wanted to believe him, but the world had taught her to doubt. And then, almost as if the universe wanted to test his words, the theater doors slammed open. A group of reporters rushed in, cameras flashing, shouting questions. Sandra froze, her hands shook, but before she could move, Keanu stood. His voice echoed through the hall, steady but firm. "Leave her alone. This is not your story." The sound of his voice carried like thunder in the empty theater. The reporters hesitated. Some lowered their cameras, others shuffled uncomfortably. Sandra rose beside him, her fears slowly melting into something stronger, not because he had spoken for her, but because he had spoken with her. In that moment, she realized something powerful. Silence was what had started their bond, but trust was what would carry it forward. When trust faced its first test, the days that followed were heavy with tension. Sandra avoided her phone as much as possible, but no one could hide forever. The headlines twisted her silence into rumors. Every time she stepped outside, strangers stared longer than they should. Keanu stayed close, not in a loud or dramatic way, but like a shadow that brought comfort. He never pushed, never demanded. He only showed up when she needed someone, as if he could sense it before she even spoke. One evening, Sandra found herself standing on the balcony of her apartment. The city stretched wide below her, glittering with lights, yet she felt small in it. The door behind her slid open, and she didn't have to turn to know who it was. "They won't stop," she whispered. "No," Keanu said, stepping beside her. "But neither will you." His words were simple, but they carried strength. She sighed. "I'm tired, Keanu. Tired of pretending everything is fine. Tired of being strong all the time." He looked at her with quiet eyes. "Strength is not pretending, Sandra. Strength is standing here right now and saying you're tired. Strength is letting someone stand beside you." Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe that. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again. She ignored it, but Keanu gently gestured. "You should see it." Hesitantly, she picked it up. The screen showed a new article. It wasn't about their silence anymore. It was cruel. It accused her of things she had never done, painted her as someone selfish, cold, untouchable. Her hand shook. "They don't know me. They don't know who I am." Keanu's voice was steady. "Then show them, not with words, with how you live." His calmness was like fire against her storm, but storms are not easy to quiet. "But what if I fail?" she asked, her voice trembling. He turned toward her, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "Then you fail with honesty, and that is never truly failing." Before she could answer, a knock came at the door. Sandra froze. Late-night knocks never meant good news. She walked slowly, heart racing, and opened it. On the other side stood a young woman, shivering, holding a small notebook in her hand. Her clothes were plain, her eyes desperate. "Miss Bullock," the woman said softly, "I'm sorry for coming here. I needed to tell you something." Sandra blinked in surprise. "Who are you?" "My name is Emily," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm the one who used to work at the studio cafeteria. I overheard something. They're not just writing lies about you. Someone is paying to spread them." Sandra's breath caught. "Paying?" Emily nodded. "I thought you should know. You deserve to know." She handed the notebook to Sandra. Inside were names, times, and short notes that pointed to a deliberate plan against her. Sandra single quotes as hands trembled as she closed it. Her silence, her trust, all of it was under attack in ways she hadn't even imagined. Keanu stepped forward, his calm voice steady. "Then we know what we're facing. Truth has a way of finding light." Sandra looked at him, then at the notebook. She realized that this was no longer just about surviving headlines. It was about fighting for her voice, her dignity, and her peace. And for the first time, she wasn't alone. The storm behind the curtained notebook lay open on the table, its pages filled with hurried handwriting. Sandra traced the lines with her finger, her heart heavy. She had faced lies before, but this was different. This was planned. Deliberate. Keanu sat across from her, leaning forward, his eyes calm, yet focused. "Whoever is behind this," he said softly, "is afraid of your truth." Sandra shook her head. "But why? I haven't done anything to deserve this. I've worked, I've given, I've stayed kind, even when it hurt. Why would anyone want to destroy that?" Keanu paused. "Because kindness itself threatens those who live in lies." His words sank deep into her chest. She looked at him, eyes wet. "But how do we fight back? I'm just tired, Keanu. I don't want to turn into them. I don't want to fight with hate." "Then don't," he replied. "We fight with something stronger." Before Sandra could respond, the knock on the door startled her again. She hesitated, but Keanu rose first, moving with quiet confidence. When he opened the door, Emily stood there again, pale and nervous. "I shouldn't stay long," she whispered. "They might know I came here, but I wanted to tell you. One of the names in the notebook works for the magazine that started this. I think he's the one leading it." Sandra swallowed hard. "Why are you helping me?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Because once, when I worked late at the cafeteria, you walked in after a long day. I was sweeping the floor, and you stopped, smiled, and thanked me. Number one ever thanked me before. You saw me. I never forgot that." Sandra felt her throat tighten. It had been such a small thing, something she barely remembered, yet it had lived inside Emily all these years. "Thank you," Sandra whispered. Emily nodded and quickly left, disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not empty. Keanu looked at Sandra with quiet certainty. "What you gave away in one moment of kindness has come back to you now. That is how we fight." Sandra pressed her hands together. "But it's not just about me anymore. If they can do this to me, they can do it to anyone. We have to stop them." Keanu gave a small nod. "Then we will, but on our terms." The next day, they met at a small diner, far from the city. No cameras, no noisy, only the quiet hum of old fans and the clatter of dishes. Sandra had not been there in years, but it felt safe. As they sat in the corner booth, Keanu slid the notebook across the table. "We follow the trail," he said, "but we do it carefully." Sandra looked around, and if we fail, he gave her the same calm look as always, "then we fail with honesty, remember." Her lips curved into the smallest smile, though her heart still carried fear. Just then, a man entered the diner. He was tall, wearing a plain jacket, his eyes sharp. He walked straight toward them, and stopped at their table. "You don't know me," he said, his voice low, "but I know what's happening to you. And if you're not careful, it will get worse." Sandra's breath caught. "Who are you?" The man leaned closer. "Someone who used to work for them. They'll keep twisting every silence, every pause, every shadow of your life into something ugly, unless you make the truth louder." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "And why are you telling us this?" The man hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "Because I couldn't carry the lies anymore." He slipped a folded paper onto the table and walked out, leaving them stunned. Sandra opened it slowly. Inside were names, connections, and a single line that made her heart pound. "The storm is not random. It's personal." She looked up at Keanu, fear and determination mixing in her eyes. "Someone wants to break me, Keanu. Someone close enough to know my silence." Keanu's voice was steady, but his jaw tightened. "Then we find out who. Together?" The face in the shadows folded paper stayed on the table between them, like a weight. Sandra stared at it, her fingers trembling. She had faced critics, rumors, and gossip before, but this was different. This was targeted. Someone wanted to break her down, and it was not a stranger, it was personal. Keanu's single quotes asked hand rested gently on the edge of the paper. His calm eyes met hers. "Fear will try to take the lead, Sandra. Don't let it." Her voice cracked. "What if it's someone I know, someone I trusted? Then the truth will hurt," he admitted, "but it will also free you." They left the diner with the paper tucked carefully in Sandra's bag. The night outside was cold, the streets dim with only scattered lamps. Sandra pulled her coat tight, but the chill wasn't from the air, it was from the thought that someone she once welcomed into her life might now be working to destroy it. Back at her apartment, she spread the pages across the table. The notes were filled with names, meetings, payments, and coded messages. Her eyes caught on one name and froze. It was not the leader of a magazine, not a studio executive, but someone much closer. She whispered the name, barely able to speak it aloud. "Marcus." Keanu leaned closer. "Who is he?" Sandra's hands shook. He was my assistant. He worked with me for years. He knew everything about my schedule, my life, my quiet moments. I trusted him." Her heart felt like it had been pierced. She remembered his kind smile, the way he always said, "I've got it handled." She had let him into her world, into her silence, into her trust. Keanu's single quotes face grew serious. That explains how they had so much detail. It wasn't from watching it, was from inside. Sandra pressed her hands against her face, tears slipping through her fingers. How could he do this to me? Keanu let the silence hold for a while. When he finally spoke, his words were steady. Sometimes people betray not because of who we are, but because of what they are missing inside themselves. Your kindness didn't fail, Sandra. His choices did. She lowered her hands, her eyes, red but fierce. Then I need to face him. Keanu nodded once, but not alone. The next evening, Sandra arranged a meeting. She told Marcus she wanted to talk, and he agreed quickly, almost too quickly. They met in a small studio office after hours, the lights dim, the room echoing with silence. Marcus walked in with that same practiced smile. "Sandra, it's good to see you. I was worried with everything going on." She cut him off, her voice trembling but firm. "Stop pretending, Marcus. I know." The smile faded. His eyes shifted, and for the first time, she saw something darker behind them. "You don't understand," he said. "I had no choice." Keanu stepped forward, his presence steady, unshaken. "Everyone has a choice." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Do you think people care about the truth? They only care about headlines. They pay for lies, and lies feed the world. I just took the chance to get something out of it." Sandra's voice broke. "You took pieces of my life, of my silence. You turned trust into profit, For a moment, Marcus looked almost ashamed, but it faded quickly into bitterness. You are never going to understand. People like me don't get remembered unless we make noise. And you, his voice hardened. You had everything. Fame, respect, kindness, that people worship. I was invisible next to you. His words cut deep, but Sandra did not look away. She had once felt invisible herself, and that was why his betrayal hurt so much. She whispered, steady and clear, being seen doesn't come from noise, Marcus. It comes from truth. And you lost yours. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder, grounding her. Marcus turned away, his face hard, and walked out of the room without another word. The silence left behind was heavy, but this time it was not empty. It was filled with truth, painful yet freeing. Sandra leaned into Keanu, whispering, "It hurts." "It should," he said softly. "But hurt means you cared, and caring is what makes you who you are." She closed her eyes, letting the tears fall, knowing this was only the beginning of a harder fight. Standing in the light days after Marcus's betrayal felt like walking through smoke. Sandra carried the weight of his words everywhere she went. She kept replaying them in her head. You had everything. I was invisible next to you, but the truth was, she did not feel like she had everything. She had given so much of herself to the world that sometimes she felt empty inside. Still, she knew she could not stay in the shadows forever. Keanu stayed close, quiet, but steady. His presence reminded her that silence did not mean weakness. Silence could also mean strength, the kind of strength that came from not rushing, not forcing, but waiting for the right moment. One evening they sat in her living room with the notebook, still open on the table. The papers felt less like evidence now, and more like a wound. Sandra touched one page lightly, then pulled her hand back as if it burned. "If I stay silent," she said softly, "they win. But if I speak, they twist my words. I feel trapped, Keanu." He leaned forward, his voice calm. "Maybe the answer is not in silence or words. Maybe it's in action." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "Show them who you are," he said. "Not through interviews or statements. Live it where no lie can survive. Let the truth be seen in the way you stand, the way you give, the way you stay human." Sandra thought about that for a long moment. Then she whispered, "You make it sound simple." Keanu gave the smallest smile. "Simple doesn't mean easy." The very next day, Sandra surprised everyone. Instead of hiding, instead of canceling her events, she showed up at a charity project she had quietly supported for years, a shelter for families who had lost their homes. Cameras were already waiting outside, but instead of running from them, she walked through the doors with calm. Steps got inside. Children ran up to her, their faces lighting up. She bent down, hugged them, and listened as they told her stories. She helped serve meals, sat at the tables, and spoke to the families as if the cameras did not exist. Keanu watched from the side, his arms folded, a quiet guard in the crowd. He saw the way her eyes softened with every child she held, the way her laughter came alive in the small moments. Later, when a reporter pushed through the crowd and asked loudly, "Sandra, are you here to fix your image?" She looked up calmly. Her voice was steady, without anger. "I'm not here to fix an image. I'm here because people matter. And if you think kindness is an image, maybe you should stay and share a meal with us." Double quotes. The room fell quiet. The reporter lowered his camera. And for once, the noise outside could not drown out the truth in her words. Afterward, when she stepped outside, she felt lighter. She turned to Keanu and whispered, "Maybe this is what you meant. Not words, just life." He nodded. Truth lives best when it's lived. But as they walked back to the car, a man stepped from the shadows. His face was one Sandra recognized instantly. "Marcus. You think this will save you?" he said bitterly. "They'll still twist it. They'll never stop." Sandra's heart clenched, but this time, she didn't break. She looked at him steadily. Maybe they won't stop, but neither will I. Keanu stepped between them, his voice calm but strong. Go home, Marcus. This path you're on will only eat you alive. Marcus's eyes flickered with something anger, guilt, maybe even regret. Then he turned and disappeared into the night. Sandra exhaled slowly, her hands shaking. Keanu touched her arm gently. You didn't run, you didn't hide. You stood in the light. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not just from pain. They were from strength. The final silent Seth storm had raged for weeks, but now there was a strange quiet over Sandra's world. Not because the noise had stopped, never truly stopped, but because she had stopped letting it own her. Still, she knew there had to be an ending, a final moment where silence, trust, and truth would face their hardest test. One evening, she received an invitation. It was for a live panel, broadcast worldwide, with actors, directors, and journalists all present. The very people who had fueled the lies would also be watching. Her manager begged her not to go. They will corner you. They will twist everything. Don't risk it. Sandra hesitated. Her fear was real. But then she remembered Keanu's words. Truth lives best when it's lived. When the night came, the hall was packed. Lights glared. Cameras stood like tall guards ready to record every breath. Sandra walked in wearing no glittering gown, no mask of perfection. She wore something simple, almost plain. As if to say she wasn't there to perform, she was there to be herself. Keanu sat in the front row, his quiet presence anchoring her. Their eyes met, and with one small nod, he gave her strength. The panel began with soft questions, but soon the storm returned. A journalist leaned forward, his voice sharp. Miss Bullock, there are claims you are hiding behind silence. People say your silence means guilt. What do you have to say to that? For a moment, the hall seemed to hold its breath. Sandra looked out at the sea of faces. She could have spoken many words. She could have defended, argued, shouted. Instead, she placed her hands gently on the table, closed her eyes for a heartbeat, and let silence itself be her answer. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Whispers began. Cameras zoomed closer. Then she opened her eyes and spoke in a voice steady and calm. Silence does not always mean weakness. Sometimes it means strength. Sometimes it means I will not play by the rules of lies. I will not waste my life answering every shadow someone throws at me. I choose silence when the world is noise. I choose kindness when the world is cruel. I choose trust, even when it hurts. Her words echoed in the hall. She paused, then added, softly, and if that makes me guilty in your eyes, then I accept it. But I know the truth, and the truth is enough. The room fell still. There were no more questions. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if unsure how to twist what had just been said. In the front row, Keanu's eyes shone with quiet pride. He knew she had not spoken for fame or for the crowd, but for herself. Later, when the event ended and the hall emptied, Sandra walked out into the cool night air. The stars above were faint, hidden by city light, but still present. Keanu walked beside her, his hands in his pockets. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Sandra whispered, I was so afraid my silence would break me, but it saved me. Keanu gave a small nod. It wasn't the silence, Sandra, it was you. You made it powerful. She looked at him, and in that moment, she felt something rare peace. The noise would never fully end. The world would always find something to say. But she had discovered something stronger than noise. The power of silence filled with truth, kindness, and resilience. And Keanu, he didn't need her words to understand. He never had. They walked on together, side by side, with no cameras, no audience, only silence. But this time, it was not heavy. It was whole.